May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell.
Here.
Trustee Miller.
Here.
Trustee Mulvaney.
Here.
Trustee Pierce. Here. Trustee Thomas.
Here.
Trustee Vree. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Trustee Vree, could you review for us where we are on our December fiscal performance?
Yeah, so it's been a pretty consistent story all year. We are in very good shape on the general fund with most of the lines coming in ahead of plan, both revenue and expenses. So as we approach the end of the year, we're in very good shape. Economic factors have continued to be pretty good as far as tax receipts go, and expenditures have been better than expected. So general fund is in good shape. The other funds, for the most part, are coming in as expected. The only one that's not would be the water fund. And we've talked about that throughout the year. It's just been a wet year. So all in, 2016 has turned out to be a good year. And we have, one more month, and we're in excellent shape. And also of note, the state of Illinois is catching up in terms of the taxes that they had been holding back for the last several months. And so we're back to being on plan with that as well. So all in, we're in good shape.
Excellent. Thank you. In the committee of the whole, this evening, what we really did was consider matters that related to review of personnel and questions of studies that we've been doing on personnel and job classifications. So there's nothing really to report in terms of any actions that were looked at or considered by the committee of the whole. At this point, one of the things I would like to ask is that I have a motion to move item 11 having to do with the consideration of the ordinance that is designed to correct an oversight or a typo when we did adopted the new liquor code, where we forgot to include what has always been there, which is the provision for a license for golf clubs, which applies to the Glencoe Golf Club. And so we have item 11 is the consideration of amending the ordinance to include that so that everything would take effect when we do our year-end or beginning of the year classification, where we adopt the new systems and so on. And that should have been included in the consent agenda. So could I have a motion to move that into the consent agenda?
I so move.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we'll consider that as part of the consent agenda as such. There's also in the minutes, there was a correction, Phil, you wanted to address?
Yes. On item 8, which was the consideration of a resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a 5-year recycling services agreement with Lakeshore Recycling Systems, there was a Scrivener's error in the second to last paragraph. In the second to last line of that paragraph, it stipulates Director Mao replied that there's a rebate. We mistakenly listed that as 7.5% per ton. That should be $7.50 per ton. So I'd just like to make that adjustment to those minutes.
Is there anything in the consent agenda that anyone wants removed, or can we take that? No.
I had one question about the consent agenda items. We were releasing the closed door meetings. There was discussion that we would make an attempt to reach out to former board members, and just wanted to see if that had been done.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
With that, if there's nothing further, could I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda, including the changes to the minutes and the inclusion of item 11?
So move.
Second?
Could I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Yes.
Trustee Pierce?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas?
Yes.
Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Thank you. This is the time when we ask if there's anyone in the public that would like to comment on an item that is not on the agenda. Okay, if there's none, could I have the village manager's report, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. First, on the village manager's report this evening is always one of my favorite things is swearing in of one of our actual new lieutenants. So it's moving somebody up rank who's been with us for quite a while, and I'm going to ask Director Carrie Lewandowski to come forward to say a few words first.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Mr. President, trustees, it's my pleasure to recognize the important milestone for Officer Ken Picosa today. Ken, you want to turn it up here, please? Ken's accompanied tonight by his wife Liz, his daughters Mackenzie and Madison. I think Madison's not real thrilled about this. His parents Nancy and Joe are also here this evening, and his brother Scott and his fiancee Jackie. Public service runs deep in the Picosa family. His father Joe is a retired district chief from the Mortonville Fire Department, and his brother Scott is a firefighter with the Wilmette Fire Department. Public Safety Commission has approved the promotion of Officer Picosa to Public Safety Lieutenant effective January 25th. Ken began his career in Glencoe as a part-time community service assistant in 2003, and while working part-time here in Glencoe, he earned his Associates of Applied Science degree in Criminal Justice in 2005. While he was working here, he made a very good impression on the department, and in October of 2006, we hired him as a full-time public safety officer. In addition to being a fully cross-trained public safety officer, Ken serves as a paramedic, firearms instructor, field training officer, rapid deployment instructor, school resource officer, foreign fire insurance board member, and a boat operator. Ken's also a member of the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System Mobile Field Force. That is a specialized unit created to respond to civil disturbances and large-scale crowd control events. Ken's very capable in all aspects of public safety, and he's dedicated to the village and the department. He's been instrumental in our efforts to migrate to an electronic scheduling system that will offer major relief to us to the manual system that we presently use. He'll be taking over our emergency services section, which focuses on emergency preparedness here in Glencoe as well as with our partnering agencies. His training and experience has prepared him well for this opportunity to mentor the next generation of public safety officers, and this promotion will fill the lieutenant vacancy created by Lieutenant Mark Wold's retirement in December. Congratulations, Ken. I look forward to many years working with you. Mr. Crowley, you're now administer the oath. I'll make it easy for you. You can read this one.
Let's see if we can get a picture while we do this. We never can get pictures, so we can do it. All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kenneth Picosa,
I, Kenneth Picosa,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the ordinances of the Village of Glencoe,
and the ordinances of the Village of Glencoe,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the position of Public Safety Lieutenant
the duties of the position of Public Safety Lieutenant
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think they're going to get a few pictures in the back there. I just would add to all of the points that Director Lewandowski made that it's always exciting when we have a new leader in the organization. He's been a leader clearly based upon the list of things he's been involved with in his time with us, and I know he's going to continue to excel. So we're pleased that Ken is one of our newest lieutenants. I wanted to just mention one other item under the manager's report. This week, residents received a letter from Public Works Director Dave Mao regarding the village's new recycling services agreement with Lakeshore Recycling Services. That is set to begin the week of February 29th. We have posted a great deal of information on the village's website regarding the transition to Lakeshore away from Groot, including frequently asked questions and contact information should there be additional questions that may come up. Adam Hall, who's our Public Works analyst, is kind of manning all of those questions, and so he's looking forward to speaking with a number of residents on this interesting and exciting changeover We have already started to field a few questions, but for the most part, all information is available on the website that is pertinent at this point, and we're going to be sending out some more to the community before the contract takes effect. But on a related note, there was an article that appeared in the Glencoe Anchor last week regarding the Village of Northfield's recent decision to offer curbside food scrap composting collection. A number of our residents have apparently reached out to the Village of Northfield about the program and have started to reach out to us as well. Just as a note, Northfield, I spoke with the village manager in Northfield today. Their program has not yet begun. It's expected to begin in the spring, and we will be gathering information from them and to see how their program is moving along once that gets underway. We plan to include the review of this service in our coming analysis of the village's refuse collection program that we're going to be doing over the course of the next fiscal year. So I just wanted to make note of that because we have started to get a few questions. I know that question has come up from a few members of the village board too, as we've heard about some of our neighboring communities. So that is the village manager's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that there may be.
Okay. Trustee Miller, is there anything new on the Plan Commission this week?
No, we took off for the holidays. We didn't have a meeting at the end of December, and our next meeting is next week.
Excellent.
Report next week.
I will take it that Santa Claus didn't bring any new goodies.
No, we'll have to bring those ourselves in the form of a great plan for the downtown.
Excellent. Trustee Thomas, anything new on the Golf Advisory Committee?
Well, we did much the same thing. We did meet in December where we reviewed the capital spending plans for fiscal year 2017. Dave Arden gave us a fairly detailed description of the various projects. We then did not meet in January, and we are meeting next week, much like the Plan Commission, to go over budgeted rates and rounds and based on our competitive analysis. Two other things I think just of interest. Believe it or not, and it seems hard to believe now given the weather, there were 397 rounds played in December at the golf course, which we essentially we budget zero. So 397 rounds is really pretty astounding. And overall, no surprise, for the year, our revenues exceeded budget, our expenses were below budget, and so on a net basis, we did quite well, considering the weather conditions we faced and so forth.
Thank you. The next order of business is the President's report, and the first item on the President's report is one of those things that one thinks of both as a very happy moment and at the same time for me a very sad moment, which it's sad in that someone who I cherish and who has been a tremendous part of our public safety department and who has done a truly outstanding job and career and who I would have liked to have seen stay a part of it for many years longer. Mark Roll has retired. And so I have the privilege and the pleasure of doing a proclamation for Mark, which I will read in a moment. But I wanted to say that from my standpoint, as much as I draw joy being able to do this, it is a very sad thing for me to be in a position where I'm doing it now, other than years from now. The resolution which I would ask the board to adopt is as follows. Whereas Mark Wall has served the village of Glencoe for 25 years as a public safety officer and lieutenant. And whereas Mark Wall, as public safety officer from 1990 until 2013, served in a variety of capacities, including tactical paramedic, juvenile officer, evidence technician, investigator, and defensive tactical instructor. And whereas Mark Wall represented the department on the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System, NIPSA, SWAT team, and founded the Tactical Emergency Medical Services team for NIPSA. And whereas Mark Wohl, as lieutenant from 2013 until 2015, served as the Emergency Service Section Supervisor, was the department liaison with Homeland Security, FEMA, NIPSA, and MABUS, and managed all critical incident and emergency medical services planning for the department. And whereas Mark Wohl created and implemented numerous drills and exercises to ensure emergency readiness protocols were established and was instrumental in the adoption of the Cook County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan as part of the overall Glencoe Emergency Operations Plan. And whereas Mark Wohl fulfilled his responsibilities to the residents of the village of Glencoe in a professional, responsible, and honorable way, and made contributions that positively affected the quality and the value of life in the village of Glencoe. And whereas Mark Wohl has carried out his role as a public safety officer and lieutenant, and served the Department of Public Safety with honor and distinction. Now therefore, be it resolved that the village president and board of trustees of the village of Glencoe, Illinois, express on behalf of all of the residents of the village their appreciation to Mark Wohl for his outstanding service and dedication to the community as a valued member of the Department of Public Safety. Be it further resolved that this resolution be spread upon the minutes of this proceeding, and that an executed copy of this resolution inscribed with the signature of the village president and bearing the corporate seal of the village of Glencoe, as attested by the village clerk, be presented to Mark Wohl. Dated this 21st day of January, AD 2016, at the village of Glencoe, County of Cook, Illinois. May I have a motion?
So
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Our hair not okay, or?
That happens all the time.
My eyes could be closed because yours were open and protecting it. There you go, Mayor.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it.
It has been wonderful. I hope we see you back.
I
We
am-
will miss you greatly.
I'll still be in the area, so Glencoe's been my family for 25 years, and that doesn't change once I live here, so I'll be in the area. Thanks, everybody, I'm very
Thank
much,
you.
thank you very much.
And thank you to your wife and the children for being here. Our next order of business has to do with the question of liquor licenses. And let me go over, just to put everything in context, the two pending matters which I'm going to make a recommendation to the board on, in terms of background and what is going on. In the past few months, the village has received 2 applications for new regular liquor licenses. Starbucks at 347 Park Avenue has requested a B1 license, and Chibo Trattoria at 667 Vernon Avenue has requested that their short-term conditional license, which is scheduled to expire on February 29th, 2016, be renewed and converted to a regular Class B2 license. As provided under our village ordinances, in my capacity as village liquor commissioner, I have reviewed these requests and have met with the leadership both of Starbucks and Chibo Trattoria. With respect to my review of their applications and the Liquor Commission hearings I held with each, let me summarize my observations and recommendations. With respect to Starbucks at 347 Park Avenue, as was reported to the board previously, the village received an inquiry in September of 2015 about a possible liquor license for the Starbucks store on Park Avenue. At that time, representatives from Starbucks corporate and their legal team met with the village manager and me and explained that their new corporate program, Starbucks Evenings, is being rolled out to a number of their locations in the Chicagoland area. Recently in our area, Starbucks stores in Evanston, Highland Park, and Winnetka have undertaken this new program. As part of the Starbucks Evenings program, Starbucks intends to roll out a larger menu of food and sell wine and beer in single servings to patrons in the afternoon and evening hours. They explained there are internal training systems that are in place for their staff, highlighting Bassett training and other steps. We explained that the village would need to take action to add a liquor license as one does not exist for them at this time in the appropriate category. Following this meeting, Starbucks submitted their liquor license application to the village on December 3rd, 2015. The application materials detailed the corporate application of Coffee House Holdings, Inc., listing the corporate officers located in Seattle, Washington area, as well as the Glencoe store manager, Mallory Weismuller, an Evanston resident. Ms. Weismuller was fingerprinted by the Department of Public Safety, which returned no findings. The application materials also included Bassett training certificates for all Starbucks staff members of the Glencoe store, the store's certificate of insurance, a copy of the store's lease, and the appropriate license fee. The village manager and I met with Mrs. Weismuller along with representatives from Starbucks corporate on January 11, 2016. At this meeting, in my role as the village's liquor commissioner, I asked more detailed questions about the store's request. They outlined that they expect that fewer than 10 units of alcohol, either wine or beer, will be served per day and only during the hours from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. That alcohol service is really secondary to their new food offerings, but that the new corporate program has found that some customers enjoy the pairing with a glass of wine or beer, that they will be implementing a table touch service that will require their staff to actually serve the spirits at the customer's table rather than over the counter, and that their corporate requirements include Bassett training as well as substantial additional internal training on alcohol service and a new requirement that all staff be over 21 years of age. In addition, the store manager outlined her own plan to increase oversight during the transition to this new service, supporting her staff as they adapt to the requirements of this program. I requested at this meeting additional information on the alcohol sales of stores in the neighboring communities that have implemented this program, as well as information on their corporate training programs, specifically on how they train their staff to understand how or if to serve alcohol to individuals who may have been drinking elsewhere before coming to Starbucks, and likewise how to refuse service where appropriate. After review of the full liquor license application materials and meeting with the Starbucks team, I recommend that the village board authorize one additional Class B1 liquor license, incidental on-premises beer and wine sales, with the approval of the village comprehensive fee and fine schedule at our February 4th, 2016 village board meeting. With respect to Chibo Trattoria at 66 667 Vernon Avenue. As the village board will recall, at the August 20th, 2015 village board meeting, the board approved a conditional liquor license for Chibo Glencoe LLC, doing business as Chibo Trattoria, which expires on February 29th, 2016. The conditions of this license included discretionary inspections to be made by the Department of Public Safety and termination at any time should there be any violations of the liquor code found. Since issuance of the license, the Department of Public Safety has made random inspections and checked that all of the Chibo serving employees serving alcohol have current basic training certificates on file with the village, and that Chibo is in compliance with all other alcohol service regulations. The Public Safety Department has conducted a number of random inspections, and there have been no violations found since the alcohol service began. Likewise, the village has received no complaints from patrons since alcoholic service began. On January 6th, 2016, the village manager and I met with all three of the Chibo partners. At this meeting, the Chibo partners reported that there have been no complaints received and that there have been no issues relative to alcohol service at the restaurant since their conditional liquor license was approved. Based upon my assessment of their performance since receiving the conditional liquor license last August and after this meeting, I recommend that the village board authorize one additional Class B2 liquor license incident sale of spirits, beer, and wine sales for Chibo with the approval of the village comprehensive fee and fine schedule at our February 4th, 2016 village board meeting. I will be happy to answer any questions that board members may have. Any questions? Okay.
President Levin?
Yes,
I was
sir.
just curious if any representatives from Starbucks or Chibo are here tonight. I'm just curious if they want,
Starbucks.
if they wanted to say anything or not.
Obviously, wanted to answer any questions you have.
All right. If there are no further questions and nothing from the public, I would mention that our next board meeting is February 4th, as I've referenced, 2016. And that there will be no meeting on February 17th, 2016 as originally scheduled. That's been moved to February 4th. Next order of business is consideration of a resolution approving an agreement for information technology, and I believe Dave Kraus is to give us the background and a briefing on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. For your consideration this evening is the professional services contract with Plant Moran for information technology assessment in an amount not to exceed $30,000. The goal of this project is to assess the village's current IT infrastructure and enterprise resource planning system, I'll refer to that as the ERP system, and make recommendations for improvements to these systems or for new technology in the future. While the village currently maintains its IT infrastructure and ERP system, which includes our financials, citizen information system, and community development modules, for example, staff believes it is time to take a fresh look at them. As such, we conducted an RFP process, and Plant Moran provided the lowest cost proposal, which most closely met the scope of this project. Plant Moran's assessment and recommendations will help us identify solutions to help us achieve our goals of streamlining business processes and accomplishing strategic plan initiatives relative to technology integration. Tonight, we are asking the board to approve the contract for the assessment services only. Staff will review Plant Moran's recommendations and proceed as appropriate thereafter. At this point, I'd be willing to answer any questions you might have on this project.
Sounds like fun.
Absent any questions, may I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell. Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney. Trustee Pierce?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas?
Yes.
Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. The next order of business is consideration of the purchase of a camera to check our sewer mains. And as I understand it, Adam, you're going to fill us in on that.
Thank you very much, President Levin, Board of Trustees. Staff is requesting that the village board authorize the village manager to execute a contract for the purchase of one 2015 EnviroSite Rover X mainline sewer televising system, or Rover, from Standard Equipment of Chicago for a total not to exceed cost of $69,303. Sewer televising is used to take digital images and videos from inside a sewer pipe by using a camera on a wheeled or tracked platform. It is a critical maintenance tool used by the Public Works Department in assessing the condition of the sanitary and storm sewer pipe in order to implement targeted infrastructure replacement, which is a strategic initiative. This current sewer camera is a 25-year-old unit that was used from a sewer contractor. It has limited tracking capability and no compatibility with the GIS system that the village currently utilizes. The technology on the new Rover is a massive upgrade over the current system. The digital images and videos and data can be integrated into the village's GIS system, increasing operational effectiveness. The purchase will be made through a national cooperative purchasing contract and will save the village 2% on the contract price. This equipment furthers the strategic initiatives of infrastructure replacement and operational effectiveness. And with that, I'll open the floor to any questions that you may have.
You talked a little bit about how it would save us money. Can you, I didn't quite get it, something about a 2% savings on something, and then just generally, how quickly will we recoup the costs of $69,000 and how will we do it?
I can answer the first part of your question, and the second part I'll refer to Dave now. The first part is, it's a cooperative purchasing, it's called National Public Powers Purchasing. It's a national corporation that allows local governments or nonprofits to purchase items at a contract rate. It's very nice. So we save about 2% off the actual price itself. And as for the recouping funds, I can refer to Dave now if you have any.
Yeah, the sewer camera is a vital component of our sewer maintenance operation. As Adam indicated, the camera that we've been nursing along for the last couple of years is outdated and doesn't function 100% of the time. The cost of the purchase price of this camera for us to contract out this service for the lineal feet that we typically televise in a typical year, we'd spend in excess of $90,000 per year for contract televising, so the payback will be very quick with this. And it's an important component in conjunction with our sewer jet and our backhaul and the operation that we use both for sanitary and storm sewer investigation, maintenance, and routine maintenance.
Thank you.
A quick question, you're referring to the camera, but it's really the truck and the camera that we're looking to purchase, not just the Rover?
Actually, the truck's been deferred, it's solely just the camera.
We currently have we currently have a sewer camera truck that we envision has several years of life left in it. So this is just the camera system and all the software and the training.
So the additional capacity of the new Rover, the digitization, et cetera, is consistent with the truck you have?
Correct. The truck is just the platform on which to operate it out of. Absolutely.
And will allow us to integrate into our GIS system.
And this is the whole cost for the training as well?
Training is included in the cost.
I would mention also in answer to Barbara's question, this has far more capacity than what we've been using, and it permits us to integrate all sorts of things in with our GPS system, which actually will make us more efficient and save us money in the future. It also lets us do a much better job of maintaining the sewers and figuring out what needs to be done and where there's problems, what those problems are and how to solve them. So it adds to our capacity, efficiency, and will save us time, costs, and money in a lot of ways, not only just saving money on the renting of the service or purchasing the service on the outside, but also in terms of saving us money on lots of other things we do. Okay, do I have any other questions on this?
Is there some process of like pricing that, I mean, I'm just shocked, it seems like really expensive. defer if it's necessary, then it's necessary. But is this like the only model that's out there?
The staff, as we noted in the write-up, staff went through an extensive process of demoing various models of camera. And the consensus was this moves up to the next level of camera from what we currently have. A camera that's pulled through the line and has limited versatility. This camera actually tracks through the line, and we can rotate the head and look up of a house service, for example, as we're doing a dye test. A sewer camera is vital in pinpointing problems that require excavation to minimize that window of disturbance on the surface. And so it is, you know, on its face, it may seem like a large capital investment, but we expect to, you know, to get many years, as evidenced by the fact that we've been operating a camera for 25 years. You know, this has got a long, useful life and will more than pay for itself in the short term.
It's a steerable camera as well too, you can steer through the pipe, and it has a better, we can get the data from it easier, it's got a USB port and a network port as well too.
I've done business with EnviroSite. I don't know if that excludes me from any voting here, but I know the product well. It's a very good product. It doesn't
Giving you
issue.
very useful and important touchstones, it doesn't prevent you. It's not a conflict.
Do you currently have a contract with them,
No.
or?
No, it's in the past.
So what do you think of the Roborex sewer technology?
It's actually very, very cool. Yeah, it's very simple.
The BT doesn't have to crawl through the pipe.
Yeah.
Peter was volunteering to do that if it turned out that Trent wasn't gonna let us buy it. And any more questions or any other questions? Okay, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Trustee Drew.
Yes.
All right, we're at the point in time where we are going to have a brief review of the recommended fiscal year 2017 budget, which of course we've been looking at in the Finance Committee and the Committee of the Whole for a long period of time. Unfortunately, and we wish he has a speedy recovery, Dave Clark is out ill this evening, but I understand, Phil, that you and Denise and Sharon will pick up. It takes 3 people to replace him.
You know,
and
it's-
hopefully get us through this.
The good news and the bad news part of this is the bad news is I am part of that presentation group, and the good news is the others are part of it. So where I trip and fall, they will pick up. We are tonight discussing the recommended fiscal year 2017 budget. I think we have a PowerPoint presentation. Is it loaded? Okay.
Yep.
And it's ready to go.
There's no.
It's not. So that's our presentation.
Overly optimistic.
Hey,
Can I so move?
there we go.
And I assume there's no implications having to do with the liquor code that you said it was loaded.
I think this is correct. So this evening, we will go through with the village board, and for the benefit of those watching over the internet and those in the room, the recommended fiscal year 2017 budget. This, to start off our discussion though, we wanted to just make mention, and Trustee Vree has already done that in his report, of really the projections for the end of the fiscal year 2016, the current fiscal year. That year does end on February 29th, a 366-day fiscal year. We get those every so often. And of note, I think it's important to make mention of the fact that in 2016, we have seen some of our expenses come in lower than budget. That includes personnel expenses that have remained vacant for a period of time, as well as some deferred or canceled capital purchases. A lot of this was done in light of the fact that we were reviewing the internal processes for selecting some of our equipment for replacement, We were also in the midst of dealing with trying to fill positions that had been created in this fiscal year. We are in a process to do that right now, but those positions in public safety specifically won't be filled until the next fiscal year. But we've had a good year from the perspective of our revenues. The village has, and we'll talk a bit about this, a long-standing practice to budget more conservatively on our revenues, and we've done that historically to help to mitigate bad years. In this particular year, though, we are seeing what will amount to a net surplus of just over $500,000 in the general fund. That is related primarily to the positive performance of our building permit fees, as well as sales tax and a number of other revenues that have come in well. And you'll also note that the bond fund, which looks like it's got a very large surplus in it, which it should, is indicative of the bond sale that was done earlier this year. That's the first half of the capital resources available for several of our large-scale capital projects, which we will talk about a bit in just a minute. So just to talk through a bit of the process that got us to this evening, starting back in October, the Finance Committee began a process of reviewing our long-range financial forecast, as well as looking at our draft tax levy, and spent a great deal of time talking about the village's financial policies. There have been a number of policies that the village has employed for many years, and the Finance Committee made a few modifications which were agreed to by the village board, and I just want to make mention of those because they did have a part in how this budget was developed. The general fund balance policy was modified. It was pushed up a bit to account for at least 2 months of operating expenses to help manage unexpected financial changes throughout the year. This was done particularly due to the fact that the state of Illinois has made it very clear, especially through the governor's office, that certain state-shared revenues may be threatened, and those revenues are significant for the village. There was a great deal of discussion on the value of having a reserve that could accommodate a short-term change in state policy. We also talked through the debt policy for the use of limited tax authority, and we talked about our pension funding obligations. Just as a note, the village has historically overfunded its police pension well in excess of the level required by the state of Illinois, on average about 135% of what the state has required. This year we dealt with a change in the state's actuarial tables, which pushed up dramatically the base cost to the village. In light of that, as well as in light of the fact that pension discussions down in Springfield may at some point be resolving towards some sort of change that may impact the village. The Finance Committee and the village board ultimately determined that this year we would fund pensions at the state required level, and then we would review that again in the future as time went on and more clarity was brought to how the state was going to move forward. That led us to the November Committee of the Whole. We talked through our initial list of core and enhanced services. That's going to be an ongoing discussion over the next several years. We looked at the fee survey and discussed a few items relative to that, as well as reviewed our long-term capital improvement plan. A full draft of the fiscal year 2017 budget was presented to the Finance Committee on December 15th. We had a long and detailed discussion at that meeting about the budget as it was presented. There were presentations made by each of the operating departments, and we walked through a series of things. One point that I think is important, as we've talked, there's been a threat of the reduction of state-shared revenues, and a long component of that discussion on December 15th focused on hypothetical revenue reduction scenarios and various contingency plans on how the village might respond to different reductions. In general, I think what was agreed to that evening is that if we face a short-term reduction in revenues, we would handle that through short-term budget reductions or the use of fund balance if necessary. If we face longer-term reductions in revenues, that would require more of a series of policy discussions with the village board to discuss those service levels and various services. But we would anticipate that there would be some notice and warning that those particular issues would be coming forward, which would give us some time to think through and talk through some of those things. At this point, none of the reduced revenue scenarios have been included in this particular recommended budget. What it does reflect is the village's long-standing practice of conservative budgeting, where we budget revenues conservatively and then budget for the norm to manage expectations that may rise during the year. Finally, at the conclusion of that Finance Committee meeting on December 15th, the committee recommended the budget be presented tonight and could be considered for final approval on February 4th. I just want to make mention before Sharon walks us through the dollars and cents of the budget of the fiscal year 2017 budget development process. This is a similar process that we have undertaken in past years, but I think it warrants some discussion and a reminder for the benefit of the public. The budget itself is a reflection of the village's responsibility to provide public services, to recognize fiscal realities, and then operate within a sound spending plan. We are, as everyone in this room understands, in the business of providing public services. We take into account the services that we need and that we provide, as well as the priorities and needs of the community and the people that we serve. We look to our strategic priorities as guideposts for planning our work, in addition to our essential municipal services. We plan our services in the context of our fiscal realities. We must do so in a way that we maintain enough flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances, such as economic downturns, as we dealt with back in 2008 through 2012, or as we've been dealing with in this past year, the threat of revenue losses. And in a way that recognizes that we have, unfortunately, little ability to generate significant new streams of revenue. Our practice has been to budget conservatively, particularly on the revenue side, and to budget for the norm, but handle exceptions that may arise during the course of the year. An example of this is when we budget for snow removal. It's difficult to know how Mother Nature is going to hit us, and as we saw in the last 2 winters, she packed a wallop. This year, knock on wood, we have had a much different winter, which has impacted our budget very differently. And so it's difficult to nail down exactly where those budgets should land, but we do try to budget toward the average and then work with what we're given. This year's budget recognizes the uncertainty that we face with the potential loss of state shared revenues and the realities of state and federal mandates that always impact our budgets. We boil all of this down as a team into the spending plan, which is the roadmap of how we plan to work over the next fiscal year, and particularly how we work toward our strategic priorities and work plan. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to walk through the budget highlights and talk through several of our funds, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have along the way.
Thank you, Manager Crowley, members of the board. As Manager Crowley mentioned just a moment ago, our budget really is guided by our strategic priorities, and they do serve as guideposts. For the sake of reminding residents who may be watching at home, our strategic priorities are financial sustainability, commercial vitality, infrastructure replacement, operational effectiveness, organizational development, and community engagement. Our mission is to provide superior public services and do so in a way that's not only financially responsible, but that supports our strategic priorities and helps us further work towards our strategic work plan initiatives. Each of the department's major initiatives planned in fiscal year 2017 are underscored by these priorities, and each has planned their work in a responsible spending plan. Our fiscal year 17 budget reflects a net reduction of 1.8% in general fund operating expenses compared to the fiscal year 16 budget, and revenues are conservatively budgeted again in fiscal year 17. The budget reflects minor revenue enhancements, again maintaining that philosophy that we'll budget prudently and conservatively. We continue to use best practices not only in budgeting, but in our ongoing financial management throughout the year. This year's budget addresses several substantial capital improvement needs, many of which are infrastructure replacement projects, such as stormwater improvement projects in the Terrace Court and Skokie Ridge areas, sidewalk replacement, and sewer lining work. We challenged ourselves this year in looking at our vehicle and equipment replacements and adjusting life cycles where we could. If a vehicle has some remaining useful life, we deferred it if it was scheduled this year and it didn't need to be replaced. So we're not simply purchasing new vehicles and equipment only because they're budgeted. We're evaluating the best use of our capital dollars to be sure that we're using money effectively and working efficiently. Our budget includes a heavy investment in the village organization through a human resources management perspective as well as a business process perspective. This year we're conducting public safety officer testing and lieutenant promotional testing, focusing on staff training in each of the departments, and reviewing our business processes to determine how we can operate more efficiently. In many cases, we're planning to increase our use of technology in our business processes as well as our public communications. Lastly, we're maintaining flexibility in an ever-changing environment through our continual financial forecasting and planning ahead by developing contingency plans, such as those that Manager Crowley described earlier. The changes to our financial policy that he also described will give us added flexibility to respond to potential changes in revenue and give us opportunities to evaluate policy changes as necessary. On the human resource management side, we're emphasizing staff training and development to ensure that our workforce is equipped to provide services in the changing environment. So now we'll talk a bit about the revenues in the fiscal year 17 budget. The general fund is the largest of the funds with $16 million budgeted in revenue, the majority of which are taxes and fees. You'll notice the bond fund having $5.2 million in revenue. This is an abnormal year in the sense that we're receiving the proceeds from the second half of the voter-approved bond referendum for capital projects that'll be completed in fiscal year 17 and 18. Drilling down a bit more on the revenues, a total of 93% of our revenue comes from property tax, charges for service, sales tax, utility tax, permits, and income tax. Property taxes are the largest single source of revenue, and our budget reflects a very modest 0.76% increase in the property tax extension that's consistent with the property tax extension limitation law, or you may know as PTAL. As we've mentioned over the last several months, some revenues distributed by the state are in jeopardy, most significantly the income tax. Looking at the big picture, fiscal year 16's revenues came in stronger than budgeted, though we're continuing our conservative approach to budgeting and only budgeting a modest increase in revenues over the fiscal year 16 budget. On the expense side, the general fund is also the largest at $16 million. The general fund includes our expenses for operations in village-wide services, such as street maintenance, sewer maintenance, public safety services, and other various administrative services. It includes expenses for personnel, capital equipment, and commodities. The bond fund's largest expenses are the capital improvement projects that I mentioned earlier. And then taking a closer look at the expenditures budgeted in fiscal year 17, personnel is the largest expense category. And the personnel budget reflects funding for vacant positions that we hope to fill this year, as well as a budgeted 2.5% cost of living adjustment for employees, though that number may be adjusted as we begin collective bargaining negotiations later this year. It also includes changes to the police pension funding policy, which Manager Crowley described, that's developed in part with the changes that the state has made to the state minimum required contribution calculation method. All in all, the expense categories culminate in a 1.85% decrease in budgeted expenses compared to the last fiscal year. This chart shows a high-level summary of the budget, looking at it from a 50,000-foot view, and shows our overall change in net position from fiscal year 16 projections to the fiscal year 17 budget. Revenues total $26 million, and expenses total $29 million. There are a couple of things I'd like to call to your attention as you look at this. In the general fund, you'll see that we're budgeting $165,000 shortfall, which we anticipate filling with general fund reserves if necessary. If we do use reserves, our projections are still such that we anticipate ending fiscal year 17 with a fund balance that exceeds our minimum new target. The $165,000 shortfall is less than what was originally presented to the Finance Committee this fall due to reductions in some of the community grants that the Community Grants Committee recommended, and those amounts are reflected in the budget this evening. The E911 fund shows a shortfall of $300,000, which is due to required radio upgrades that would allow us to move onto the Starcom radio network. And the bond fund appears to show a shortfall of $2.7 million, though I would remind you that the first half of the voter-approved bonds were sold in fiscal year 16, and those are in the fund as fund balance. This is simply the timing of the first half of the bond sale and projects being completed in fiscal year 17, and it's not a structural deficit within the bond fund. Taking a look at some of the major initiatives that we're working towards over the next fiscal year, we've included a summary on the chart before you and the slide before you, and have included a more detailed overview of them in the Finance Committee presentation and the Committee of the Whole presentation, as well as in your budget narratives. Overall, these are the types of initiatives that we expect to complete in the next fiscal year to support our strategic priorities and align with our work plan. We'll quickly walk through the other funds in the village's budget, starting with the water fund. One of the most significant things happening in the water fund will remain our review of our long-range water production and distribution system needs. We're in the midst of a distribution system analysis that we hope to receive a report back on in roughly the March timeframe. Also in the water fund, we're budgeting approximately $200,000 for a water main replacement, which is double what we budgeted in fiscal year 16. We'll continue to do maintenance on the system as needed, and that's also budgeted here in the water fund. Within the garbage fund, we'll roll out the new recycling contract that the board approved at last month's meeting, and we anticipate conducting a comprehensive review of our garbage collection services and program costs over the next fiscal year. In the E911 fund, we're studying 911 consolidation mandates that have been issued by the state and potential solutions that may allow us to meet those mandates, as well as upgrades to the radios that I mentioned earlier to move to the Starcom network. Lastly, the bond fund reflects funding for large capital projects. In addition to the stormwater projects I mentioned, we have a Village Hall HVAC replacement project, sewer lining work, and sidewalk replacement that's planned for this coming fiscal year. I won't go too into detail on this chart. It's a summary of our fiscal year 17 capital budget. I would just note that our capital projects are totaling expenses are totaling $6.3 million in fiscal year 17. So to wrap up and recap, the recommended fiscal year 17 budget includes revenues of $26 million and expenses of $29 million, and we plan major capital projects and spending in the budget. The strategic priorities are guiding our operations and the overall capital spending plan to align with our long-range financial plans. The fiscal year 17 recommended budget is a statement of how the village exercises its fiscal responsibility. Some of the major highlights from that are a 1.8% reduction in general fund operating expenses compared to last year's budget, maintaining funding of critical responsibilities, including our pension contributions, budgeting very modest revenue increases that's consistent with our policy and our practice, and a 0.76% property tax extension increase consistent with PTEL, and importantly as well, retaining flexibility to accommodate possible changes in state funding in the future. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
I have one quick comment.
Oh, okay.
On the 5th page with the pie chart, I just wanted to suggest that we include, as we discussed, a notion or a reference to sustainability, quality of life, and there are other factors that are guiding our budget process, right? So the notion of sustainability is not reflected here, but I think we intended it to be.
That's a good point, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now provide, for the February 4th board meeting then, we will provide to the board a fully updated budget document, and that will be before you for consideration and approval at that board meeting.
That concludes our public session. I would like a motion, if I may, to reconvene in closed session for the purpose of discussing under Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1, Employee Performance and Compensation. Can I have a motion, please?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.